well-regulated militia be necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us once again. On the program today, we're going to talk a little bit about the Second Amendment sanctuary movement in Virginia. So, we do this program each and every weekday from Farmville, Virginia, in Prince Edward County. Well, the Prince Edward County Board of Supervisors is going to be meeting Tuesday evening to consider a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. I will be there for that meeting in Farmville, Virginia. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully going to have a chance to speak. I don't know how this is going to go. I mean, every county is different, but we'll get you an update on the growing number of Second Amendment sanctuaries coming up in just a couple of minutes. Before we do that, though, I want to welcome to the program an old friend. Nikki Goeser is going to join us here in just a minute. She is the author of a book that has just been re-released, her memoir, Stalked and Defenseless, How Gun Control Helped My Stalker Murder My Husband in Front of Me. I met Nikki Goeser shortly after that crime happened. Her beloved husband, Ben, and Nikki had a karaoke business. And they were at a restaurant that was a gun-free zone. Nikki, a concealed carry holder, left her firearm in her car. And this stalker came inside, violated the restaurant's gun-free zone policy, and brutally murdered Nikki's husband right in front of her. Unfortunately, the story does not end there, as you will hear in our conversation with Nikki Goeser. Take a look and a listen. Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the program. It is so good talking with you again.
Thanks for having me on, Cam.
Absolutely. So you have you have re-released your book with some new content here. Stalked and Defenseless: How Gun Control Helped My Stalker Murder My Husband in Front of Me. And I got to tell you, Nikki, I mean, it sounds like this story sounds like your story. It continues. This guy continues to try to hurt you more than a decade after he took the life of the man that you love.
Yes, I have recently learned that he has been sending me twisted love letters from prison. What he does is he sends them to my former attorney that I used for my wrongful death suit against him, which I won, by the way, but he's indigent, so I get nothing, apparently. And he's been sending these letters for years, and I just found out from my attorney.
That is just unreal. And you write it to Fox News that you've learned that despite him doing this, despite him trying to contact you from behind bars, the criminal justice system, the Tennessee prison system, you say, has granted him early release and good behavior credits, even as he continues to try to stalk you from prison.
Correct. Now, I don't know that the prison system is completely aware of what he's doing.
Yeah.
They're going to know now.
Yeah.
But I've hired attorneys, and I'm going to try to move forward to make sure that this evil, dangerous person stays locked up. I mean, I'm terrified and furious at the same time.
Yeah, and understandably so on both counts. Do you know what is the status of when this guy is actually eligible for release right now?
Well, he was supposed to be in prison until 2032, but because he has earned the max in early release good behavior credit, his release date is now October 21st. 2028. And, a lot of people think, oh, well, that's 8 years out. Well, yeah, but the past 10 and a half years has gone by so fast. Mm-hmm. 8 years is going to be here before I know it.
Absolutely. And the fact of the matter is that if this guy is continuing to try to affect your life from behind bars, that is not good behavior. That should not be anything that you get credit for. And it is my sincere hope that if the penal system is aware of what's going on, if they're made aware of this, that perhaps those credits can be revoked. But, at the same time, I think it demonstrates the flaws perhaps in the criminal justice system, and the fact that ultimately, if a bad person wants to try to do bad things to you, we can have all the laws on the books. We can have a criminal justice system. We can have police. We can have sheriff's deputies. They can try to do their job to the best of their ability. But sometimes, it's up to us as individuals to protect ourselves, whether that is with a firearm or whether that is, again, by calling out this type of behavior when it happens so that hopefully we can see justice done.
Right. Millions of women each year are stalked and they feel threatened. And according to the CDC, 1 in 6 women have been stalked during their lifetime. And I have to tell you, Cam, the advice that women are getting from these women's advocacy groups and stalking resource groups, I've looked online, and the advice they give, it may be needed, but they tell you things like you might want to consider changing your name, moving, changing jobs, not following a routine, get a restraining order, tell others about the stalker and what they're doing. The list goes on, but one thing that is generally not talked about are the benefits of getting training on justifiable use of force, self-defense, getting a gun legally for self-defense. This is seen as a taboo subject, and it's not openly talked about when advising women on how to protect themselves. And I think this should be an option that is openly shared with women, not avoided. Women can then decide for themselves what will work best to help protect them and their loved ones.
Absolutely. And, look, we have armed citizen stories every day on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. And it is not uncommon for us to feature stories of women who, unfortunately, were put in that position where they had to protect themselves with a firearm from an abusive ex or a stalker. And we also cover those stories where women were tragically murdered because their stalker or their abuser ignored gun-free zones, ignored no contact orders, ignored prohibitions on them owning firearms. There was just a story in Durham, North Carolina, a couple of weeks ago of a young woman who was murdered in the parking lot of the healthcare complex where she worked by a guy who was prohibited by law from possessing a firearm, who had repeatedly violated, Nikki, his orders of protection. And every time he would get arrested and he would immediately bond out and he would go do it again. There was a story out of Illinois that we covered last week where a woman had to shoot her abuser after he beat her in her car. Turns out this guy had assaulted her several times before. Now, she doesn't have a concealed carry license in Illinois, so she was arrested too. Her abuser got $10,000 bond and was out on the streets in just a little bit of time. She got a $75,000 bond for not having a concealed carry license, even though police say she was justified in shooting him. And if she had, maybe if somebody had talked to her, if she had gone through the process of getting her concealed carry license, I still think it's an abuse of justice what's happened to her. But again, we see these stories every day of women who are forced to protect themselves, and they are able to thankfully walk away from that abuse and from that attack. And we also see the other side of that coin. We see women who lose their lives to their abusers in a criminal justice system that has, if not empowered those abusers, has certainly allowed them to repeatedly violate the law with little to no consequence.
There's real dangers to gun-free zones. These women should not be made defenseless. So just like you said, the example you gave, if a woman works at a business that prohibits guns on the business property, so she can't have the gun with her, on her, inside the business, and she can't even have the gun locked inside of her personal vehicle, that woman is defenseless there, as well as if she stops by the grocery, the gas station, the bank, and when she pulls into her own driveway. Where do you think a stalker is going to go if they're bent on harming or killing a woman? They're going to choose where they know their victim is most likely to be helpless.
Right.
Women have got to be able to protect themselves. And what good is owning a gun if you can't have it with you?
Listen, I'm right there with you. And, we had a bill that was introduced in Virginia, I think in the last session, that would, if a individual had to file an order of protection against somebody, that they would be able to carry on an emergency basis. And actually, the state would provide funding for expedited training if they couldn't afford it. I loved this bill. I thought this bill would have saved lives, but unfortunately, lawmakers in Virginia did not pass it, did not approve it. Governor Northam, I don't think, would have signed it had it even gotten to his desk. And instead, we see gun control advocates saying, well, we have to, close the boyfriend loophole, or we have to, prohibit individuals from possessing firearms if they have a domestic violence misdemeanor in their past. They're trying to ban their way to safety, as opposed to actually empowering these victims to be able to protect and defend themselves.
Right. I mean, look, I don't think that it's fair that women have to bear the burden of changing their entire life and live like a hermit because of some creep. They should be empowered to protect themselves. Gun rights are women's rights.
Absolutely. So what has been the response with the re-release of your book? Are you, it sounds like you're sparking some conversations.
Yeah, it's been very positive. I just was on Fox and Friends and on Judge Andrew Napolitano's show, and I believe my segment with Tucker Carlson will air tonight.
Excellent. I will be sure to watch that. And again, I know that it's hard for you to talk about this, but I know that you're passionate about trying to protect others out there, and you're passionate about wanting to make sure that what happened to you and your lovely husband doesn't happen to anybody else. And so that I admire you for your courage and your strength and your convictions, Nikki. But again, I really thank you for speaking up and for speaking out.
Well, thank you for having me on, Cam. It's always nice to speak with you.
It's always good talking with you as well, Nikki, and we'll do this again soon. And before we let you go, let's talk real quick about the Crime Prevention Research Center, if we can.
Sure.
So tell me about your work with the Crime Prevention Research Center and what you all are focusing on right now.
Sure. Right now, we're trying to talk with people about the dangers of red flag laws.
Mm-hmm.
I use myself as an example, Cam. Red flag laws completely ignore due process. It's take the guns first and due process later. And I think that's very dangerous. Take myself for an example. After this horrible thing happened where I lost my husband right in front of me, I witnessed this. Of course I was depressed. That's a normal human reaction. And I'm telling you, there were days where I would go to sleep and I'm thinking, how am I gonna go to bed and wake up tomorrow and face another nightmare day where I don't have my husband and this has been forced on me by this evil person? I remember thinking, if the good Lord decides to take me in my sleep, I'm fine with that. This is really difficult. This is difficult. Now, does that mean that I wanted to kill myself? No. It means I was going through grief, trauma, and loss. But you can understand where some people might misinterpret that.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be someone very well-meaning, a family member, a neighbor, a coworker, a friend, and all the judge has in front of them is a concern, a piece of paper in front of them. Before you know it, there's a knock at the door. The police are here to confiscate your guns and your basic human right of self-defense. Can you imagine what that would have been like for me to go through that trauma and then be stripped of my basic human right of self-defense with no due process?
And then to add, I think, injury to the infringement on your rights, after they would have taken your guns, they would have done nothing, Nikki, to help you cope with the grief that you were wrestling with, because red flag laws are not mental health laws. They take any legally owned firearms from people, but they don't help somebody get counseling. They don't have any mental health component. It is a gun control bill that's sort of disguised as a mental health bill.
Right. And, if you can't afford an attorney,
yep,
tough. You're in order to keep your basic human right of self-defense, you're going to have to find the money to pay an attorney to represent you. For me, I had already lost my husband, which was horrible enough, but I've also lost half of my household income, and now you're going to force me to pay at least $10,000 to hire an attorney to try to keep my basic human right of self-defense, where it was taken from me with no due process. Like, this is bad. It is.
But you're right. And that's something that people don't think about. I mean, because they think, well, a judge is doing this and the police are coming to take the guns. This is a civil matter in court. So public defenders you're not eligible for a public defender. If you can't afford an attorney, you've got to go it alone. In fact, the Naples News down in Florida just did a big story last week talking about how 80% of the red flag defendants are representing themselves in court And in large part, that's because they cannot afford an attorney. You're absolutely right about that, Nikki. Listen, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the program, for everything that you're doing. And I hope we get a chance to talk again in person here before long, but you are always welcome back here on Cam & Company.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too, Nikki. Nikki Goeser joining us here on Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. I think Nikki is one of the strongest people I know, honestly. And, we should not minimize the work that she does along with Dr. John Lott of the Crime Prevention Research Center to really provide data and research that is not colored with an anti-gun viewpoint. I think that is absolutely critical work that they're doing there. And again, as I said, I'm a big fan and a friend of Nikki Goeser. I'm glad she could be with us on the program today. So before we get to our armed citizen story, our recidivist report, our good deed of the day, let's get you caught up on what's going on in the state of Virginia as far as Second Amendment sanctuary movements go. So we now have 95 Second Amendment sanctuaries as of Tuesday morning, after two more counties signed on with resolutions in support of the Second Amendment on Monday night. Pulaski County in the southwestern part of the state approved the measure unanimously. I believe there are about 800 people in attendance. And Montgomery County, Virginia, approved this measure as well, 4-3. There was actually some concern that Montgomery County was not going to become a Second Amendment sanctuary community. It is the county where Blacksburg, Virginia is located. You also have not far away Radford University just outside of Montgomery County. So it's a rural, semi-rural, suburban area. You got a couple of small towns there, and Blacksburg's actually a pretty good sized college town. So the concern was that that mindset that you find in college towns may lead county supervisors to vote down a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. That did not happen. They had a great turnout in Montgomery County. Thank you to every gunner out there who showed up and was there. I got to tell you, I think that same concern exists in Prince Edward County, where tonight's meeting will take place in Farmville, Virginia. Farmville is home to not only Hampton City College, but Longwood University, which is a public university. The students are mostly home for Christmas now, but there have been rumors that there are going to be students showing up to protest, professors showing up to protest. Again, I have no idea what the turnout is going to be like in Farmville at the Prince Edward County Board of Supervisors meeting, but no gun owner that I know is taking this vote for granted. So I hope that there's going to be really strong turnout. We've got a number of other communities that are going to be considering or voting on Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions on Tuesday. I think it is not just possible, but I think that it is probable that by the time the sun rises over the Commonwealth of Virginia on Wednesday morning, we have more than 100 Second Amendment sanctuary communities. The vast majority of those are going to be Second Amendment sanctuary counties. Right now, with the addition of Pulaski and Montgomery, I believe we're up to 78 of Virginia's 95 counties that have adopted these resolutions just since the election in November. So we've had, 6 weeks since the election. Before November's elections in Virginia, there was one county in the state that had adopted a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution, Carroll County. Since then, again, 77 others have joined them, along with 17 towns and cities across the state of Virginia. It is, again, this movement, despite the objections and the growing protests on the part of gun control activists and anti-gun politicians, it really just continues unabated. One of the things that we're going to be taking a look at over the next few days, however, is what happens next, because most of these votes, after this week, most of the votes will have been taken. And most of the counties in Virginia will have already adopted these Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions. So once those votes have been cast and those resolutions approved, what happens? We're going to get into that here on Bearing Arms Cam & Company and at BearingArms.com. Right now, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. We will unfortunately start there. Alabama, where the suspect in a number of crimes, including a deadly shooting at an apartment complex, has been taken into custody. And again, it's not like this individual was any stranger to law enforcement. Cordlin Garrett 26 years of age, has a lengthy criminal history, according to AL.com. He was taken into custody Saturday night after a Crime Stoppers tip led to his arrest. He's charged with, right now, one count of murder in the December 7th slaying of 56-year-old Kenny Hambright, who was killed at Woodside Condominiums in Center Point, Alabama, Jefferson County. It was about 11 p.m. that Saturday night. Jefferson County Sheriff's Office called reports of shots fired at the apartment complex. Same apartment complex, by the way, where a woman named Camille McKinney was killed in October, and a woman was found kidnapped last weekend. So this is not a great place to live. Deputies arrived. They found Hambright in the parking lot, suffering from a gunshot wound. He lived in the apartment complex where he was killed. And then Friday, the day before Garrett's arrest, Crime Stoppers announced it was looking for Garrett in crimes that happened earlier in the day on December the 7th at that same apartment complex. Garrett sought on charges of attempted murder, as well as discharging a firearm into an occupied dwelling. He had been seen walking around the complex with a rifle. Sheriff's Chief Deputy David Agee said, quote, "He's a dangerous young man. We wanted him bad. We suspect he's involved in other crimes. We really wanted to find him and get him off the street. We're grateful to whoever called that tip in." AL.com reports that Garrett has multiple prior arrests for charges including theft, loitering, attempted to elude, unlawful breaking and entering, carrying a pistol without a license, menacing, domestic violence, assault, drug possession, harassment, burglary, robbery, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. You know, when you have to stop to take a breath, there's a laundry list of crimes for a 26-year-old man. Now he's facing the most serious charges of his life, including murder. But again, you have to wonder what happened. With all of those previous charges, why was this guy out on the street, walking around that apartment complex, and allegedly, again, targeting innocent lives? Our armed citizen story of the day from Fresno, California, of all places. Yes, Virginia, there is still self-defense in Fresno, California. ABC 30 reporting that a Fresno County homeowner who was armed stopped a thief from burglarizing his home. Homeowner woke up just around 7 a.m. to the sound of his front door rattling. So the homeowner got out of bed, went to go check it out, and grabbed a gun on his way to check it out. Called 911, actually, found 39-year-old Omar Rosales and held him there until police arrived. Sergeant David Puglisi says, quote, "I will never tell anyone not to protect their own property." Good for him. "I will never tell anyone not to protect their own property. It's a dangerous situation." He says, "You'll never know what you'll get when it's someone you're not expecting. You never know if they're carrying a gun or what their intentions are going to be. It's never a safe situation to confront somebody, but he's not going to tell you not to protect your own property." Because, frankly, in this case, it might not have been a matter of protecting his own property. It might have been a matter of protecting his life. You don't know. When a stranger's trying to come in your door, the sergeant is right. You don't know what their intentions are. You don't know if they're carrying a gun or a knife or if they're unarmed. You don't know. All you know is that somebody who doesn't belong in your house is trying to get in. Right? So yes, you are walking into an unknown situation. And I'm glad to hear the sergeant say, you know what, I'm still not going to tell anybody you shouldn't protect yourself, because you absolutely have the right to do so. Deputies say the man actually has a gate in front of his home. Suspect opened it, apparently, and drove in. He never made it inside the house. He's now being booked on charges of attempted burglary. The homeowner there in Fresno, California, not facing any charges, thankfully. All right, let's get to our good deed of the day from Grafton, Massachusetts. CBS Boston reporting on a good Samaritan who came to the aid of two teenagers who were in some real trouble. So this happened Friday night in Grafton, Massachusetts. Icy roads, bad weather, teen driver, and basically that driver lost control of the vehicle that he was in and ended up hitting a stop sign, crashing into a river there in Grafton, Massachusetts. 17-year-old Zachary Mark of Grafton was behind the wheel. His girlfriend was in the passenger seat. He jumped out right before the car went into the river, but his girlfriend was trapped, and he said he was sitting there thinking, oh my God, I just killed somebody. Well, thankfully, Mark started yelling for help, and somebody answered, a guy named Chris Etry, a driver who was passing by, saw the crash, jumped into action, grabbed a tool from his a work truck. He works construction, ran into the freezing water, smashed the back window, able to pull that teenage girl out before the car sank completely into the water. Now, keep in mind, again, this is not, and we've had these stories, before where a car, loses control or driver loses control of the car, ends up in a retention pond or a drainage ditch or something like that. This was a river, right? I mean, this wasn't some static body of water here. Officer Thomas Missionwitz says the vehicle didn't just go into the water and sit. It drifted probably 30 or 40 feet. He said the car was sinking nose first. It was definitely taking on water as it was sinking. Both teens taken to the hospital, both uninjured. Thomas Missionwitz, the officer there in Grafton, Massachusetts, says, that's my job. He said, I'm trained for this every day. He said, I don't think Mr. Etcher is training for water rescues. He said, but he knew exactly what to do at the right time. And meanwhile, that incredible hero there, Chris Ettrick, says he's simply happy that both people are safe. He said there were valuables lost, but it doesn't really matter. He said you value life over everything. Well, again, in the right place at the right time and willing and able to help out those teens in distress. Chris Etchery there in Grafton, Massachusetts, we thank you for your very, very good deed. That is, unfortunately, all the time that we have for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. But I do appreciate you being a part of the program. So don't forget, Friday, we're going to be doing an all-email version of the program. You're going to keep me company, so make sure you give me your thoughts and your comments. You can email them to me at cam.edwards@bearingarms.com. Also, don't forget, you can subscribe to the show as a podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and townhall.com's podcast page. You can also become a VIP member of Bearing Arms, get exclusive content and commentary. You can do that at bearingarms.com. Thanks again for being a part of the program today. We'll have a full report from Prince Edward County, Virginia, and the Farmville version of a Second Amendment sanctuary vote on tomorrow's program. Also, Virginia Delegate Nick Freitas scheduled to join us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow with another Bearing Arms Cam & Company.